Hello, my name is Winslaya and welcome to my video going over the 50th dev diary for Age of Wonders 4. This one is covering the new Elder Vampire Ruler type, which is coming out with the Thrones of Blood that is releasing on November 11th. It says so right here in this little opening blurb about the Elder Vampire Rulers. It looks like we have Luis here. Luis is one of my favorite developers over at Age of Wonders 4. He worked primarily on the Primal Fury DLC. He was one of the leads on that one, and I really liked the way a lot of the content that he designed just generally interacts with the game. And I'm very excited to go over a lot of the details that I was just reading about. I read through this once so that I didn't miss anything important. For example, one of the things that really stood out to me here at the very beginning of the dev diary is that the new vampires are not going to be able to recover health and they will have damage penalties in most terrain types unless they are underground, in gloom terrain, or sunless terrain. They're going to have generally a lot of trouble um, healing and dealing damage normally. So I think the start that gives you the ability to terraform terrain into gloom is going to be one of my favorite combinations with the new ruler type, these vampire elders. But it's kind of hard to know until I get my hands on the content myself. Sounds like we're getting a new terrain type called sunless terrain, and I'm very interested to see how you can terraform things to be sunless. I would imagine that these new empire ruler types have access to that ability later down the line using their upgraded vampire castles, which replace the wizard towers. They also mention here at the beginning that there are two types of elder vampire, pureblood and hybrid, which I believe are just cosmetic differences. Hybrids can have form, but will not have as much customization as pureblood vampires, at least visually speaking. That's what I'm getting from the opening intro to this dev diary. Looks like this one is maybe more of a pure blood leader, whereas this is a hybrid ruler that has that the feline type form. I forget what they call them in in the Age of Wonder 4 forms. There's like over 15 different forms at this point, so I don't know all their names off the top of my head. This next part is talking about how we won't have wizard towers that we're playing as the elder vampires will have vampire castles, which can evolve in similar ways to the wizard towers, unlocking new interactions. This is not just going to give you extra Imperium and extra vision, but also gives you the ability to use thralls and ritual spells. We had thralls with the Eldritch Sovereign Ruler type that was introduced with, I think it was called Eldritch Realms, that DLC at the end of the first expansion pass. And I thought for a second that it was talking about building units that were thralls, but I think this is building up a resource like what you use to cast those ritual spells using food income to produce them. They have a separate tracker and do not take away from population growth. So if you have more food income, you're going to be able to use the thrall spells that the elder vampires get access to a little bit more often. That's a really neat interaction because getting thralls as an elder sovereign required battling uh, enemy stacks and just farming the map that way. Instead, the thralls that the elder vampires get access to are homegrown, and that's what it says right here. And the first few spells they share with the elder sovereign, like the clairvoyance ritual, which lets you find nearby points of interest. I think that's infestations and ancient wonders. But they also get things like the ritual sacrifice that let them heal the vampire on the world map, and a powerful blood moon ritual which blots out the sun and removes the penalties of all the surface world to all vampires, no matter if they're in the new sunless terrain or not. I would imagine that lasts for a turn. Maybe it's different than that, but that would make sense. If you cast a very powerful, expensive spell, you should be able to take advantage of that for at least one strategic turn. The upsides follow a similar fashion. Instead of having an item forge, they now have soul forge, which grants them the item forge from turn one, it sounds like, but maybe not. And in addition, it allows them to recruit hatchling and vampire matriarch. Vampire no, matriarch vampire spiders, as well as two new units, the tier 1 Doombat and the tier 2 Shrieking Bat. I think the Doombat was like potentially that swarm of bats that we saw in the screenshots for the new DLC, but I'm not too sure if we've gotten a lot of information on that unit yet. There is an abattoir, I think is how you would say this, that replaces the prison and allows them to devour captured heroes instead of executing them, which sounds really cool because I think generally speaking you wanted the heroes that you defeated to go to your crypt and not your prison, because you'd have to build a prison and a crypt, or an upgraded prison and upgraded crypt, to execute those heroes, and then to, I think, sell their remains, which is not ideal because that takes longer to get that infrastructure up and running. But now this is going to allow you to get some benefits on your ruler for having captured heroes that you can execute, and this will grant them an amount of experience that increases with the level of their sacrifice meal. So if you capture a level 10 hero and sacrifice them, you get more out of it than a level 5 hero. There's also the fact that the crypts become deep crypts that allow vampires to regenerate faster in their own domain. So since they struggle with regenerating health in general, it sounds like they've got an interaction that lets them heal faster when they are regenerating. The channeling chamber becomes a ritual chamber that helps reduce the amount of thralls needed to cast rituals. So you're not going to have more casting points, or you might have more casting points, but another thing that you get is the fact that you can reduce the cost to cast some of those rituals through your infrastructure, if that's something you want to pursue as the new vampire ruler. Next we have that vampires can spread their curse to others, so you can recruit or convert heroes, turning them into turned vampires, giving them the new unique skill tree, which they show off further below, as well as signature skills. And it also turns the unit into an undead unit type, meaning, you know, if you're seeing opponents that are vampires, you may want to invest in fire and light damage, because that will deal a lot more damage to undead units. They also suffer from sunlight weakness and gain a new passive called experience drain, which means basically they give a portion of their experience to the vampire that turned them. So the ruler that of the empire that is spreading the vampire curse will get more experience a little bit faster and get to higher levels a little bit more easily. They don't have to be the one participating in combat to gain experience, which seems really, really beneficial. So long as you have a hero in every stack, that means that you're going to be able to get experience on your main ruler a lot more easily. Alright, so now there's two paths here. There's a right side and a left side. One is about control, and one is about support, I believe. Where does it say that? I remember reading that earlier. They get a draining bite or a siphon blood, which is a weaker ranged version of the draining bite. They can target and heal the vampire for half of the damage that they deal. Unfortunately, you can only drain blood on things that can have the bleeding effect, so elementals cannot be bled, so they can't be drained, and therefore can't be targeted with these abilities. So another thing you can do is focus on elementals if you're facing a vampire ruler. Next, they talk a little bit about that initial class can be reset so that you get access to the other type of ability. And what else do we have here? The Vampire's Drain has the ability to stun, and as they get experience, it turns into a mind control with a dominate effect at higher levels, allowing you to capture enemies and add them to your own army for a mana cost. Yeah, dominate is a pretty powerful effect, so having that on your signatures, no, not your signature skills, on your specific path that's tied to your ruler seems very powerful. As you can see here, you only have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points to get all the way down to the bottom of the skill tree. And I have to imagine that this icon with wings is not the mind control effect. I think it would be this one down here. So 1, 2, 3, 4 points would get you to the ability to dominate enemy units. That's only 4 levels. That's pretty generous, and will allow you to really snowball your starting army's power pretty quickly, so that, you know, you're taking on enemy units, and then you're able to go take on other fights a little bit quicker too. The second path, the draining familiar, allows them to feed on friendly units, gain hit points and strength. So I guess I would give you the strength and effect. That sounds pretty powerful in general. They give temporary something, granting regeneration effect from wounds. Okay. Their skills grant the vampire ability to bypass defenses while draining its enemies, reducing the cooldown on the drain ability, turn to mist when threatened, and even vampiric flight passive, allowing the vampire to gain flying movement speed and grant some evasion from range attacks. That's cool. So they like turn into a bunch of a cloud of bats or something. I like that idea. It should allow you to move across the map pretty efficiently, and also the strategic layer as well. Now we have the signature skills. I haven't read through this yet, so I bet I'm going to miss some important stuff. I'm going to take my time to actually read these sentences here. Because of the fantasy tropes, you make sure they had lots of options to make it so you can play the vampire the way you want to. To do this, yeah, you've got signature skills. They're all unique to vampire, and there's a lot. There's 25 unique skills. So it looks like at the first level, you got these 4. At the next level, you've got these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then at this level, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then, whoa, here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 abilities. That seems like you get more and more as you go further down the tree. Each signature skill gives them different sets of options. So level 4, you get to pick from active abilities and passives, each with a different theme. For example, the desecrator signature skill allows your vampire to cause rotting explosions by targeting corpses, and as a passive, grant tier 1 zombies at the start of combat for more undead theme. Meanwhile, hemomancer allows the vampire to sacrifice their hit points to empower their next attack, and passively when they heal they passively heal when they kill an enemy. Okay, that seems pretty good. They can sacrifice their hit points and get hit points back when you're starting to kill off enemy units, so kind of risky, but sounds generally pretty good. Level 8, they get to pick from 6 passives, from reducing cooldowns on their kill using the Reaper passive. That would be this one right here. Dispelling enemy status effects with their from their attacks using the defiler passive, which would be down here at the bottom, or empowering themselves as their hit points are reduced with vampiric rage. That's funny. There's like a way to kind of be a bit of a barbarian, go into a rage state as a vampire. As long as they're losing hit points, they get stronger. That's not too bad if you have the ability to ward a hero or keep them alive with the well, you actually, if I'm reading this correctly, you won't have access to the, maybe you will have access to Keeper's Mark from the order trait, but I'm not sure which one of these would be associated with order. They don't look very order associated, I guess is the word that I'm trying to think of. It's still early for me, so my brain's not entirely awake. Level 12, the vampire picks up a new active ability from 6 abilities. Here's a few examples. The gravemarch creates 4 corpses of tier 1 skeletons in the target area, and then for the next 4 turns, the vampire revives a random corpse on the battlefield, be it those you spawned or existing ones. I assume that means you can revive enemy units to fight on your side. That sounds pretty good. That seems very good. If you can target the most powerful enemy on the battlefield to defeat and then spawn them on your own side, I like the sound of that a lot. That makes sense for a level 12 signature skill. Pretty powerful. Bloodblight gives Bloodblight damages and applies blood parasite, a new status effect that we will see in future dev diaries. Excellent. To target in nearby units. If I had to assume what that does, I would guess that it has to do with that new little worm unit that we saw in a couple of little images. And I assume that when somebody dies with the blood parasite, it spawns in a unit kind of like the tier 1 skeletons from Necrotize. Necrotize is very powerful because it allows you to deal damage and get more units on your side of the battle relatively early in the game. This is something that comes into play later, so it's probably even more powerful than Necrotize. Tormenting Mist creates a somber mist around the vampire that deals frost damage, demoralizes, and torments all enemies that it reaches. That sounds not bad. a lot of the shadow affinity stuff demoralizes enemies, so having extra sources to reduce morale sounds quite good, quite powerful in general. Blood Communion heals a friendly unit and the vampire while both removing status effects. If that's all status effects, I like that a lot. If it's just like one or two status effects, I don't know how powerful that's really going to be relative to these other things that we've looked at. I think Gravemarch is my favorite out of the four that they've mentioned here. There's probably a good reason why they put it at the top of the list for this level 12 signature skills. We could guess what the rest of these does, like Marrow Drinker, Profane Body Master. This sounds like something that would dispel things, but who knows? Um, Nightlord might be you get benefits when you're in sunless terrain, or you've cast a blood moon ritual rather. And now we have a little bit more at level 16. You get access to these signature skills, and you get to pick from 3 unique to this level, or you can upgrade the skill you picked at level 12. Interesting. So these look like maybe the upgrades to the, or maybe one of these is an upgrade to, yeah, this is exsanguinate there. This looks like violent exsanguination is the upgraded version, whereas the other ones cannot be picked because they took exsanguinate at level 12. And then I think generally speaking, everybody should have access to supernatural speed, rosebound noble, or curse to undeath. Let's see what else they had to say here. The upgrade depends on that skill. Gravemarch would summon a tier 3 and tier 4 undead units instead of tier 1 skeletons. It starts by summoning tier 3 and tier 4 undead units. Seems pretty powerful. Those units are generally quite a bit stronger than the tier 1 undead units. Bloodblight would spread to more targets. Tormenting Mist would give you a permanent aura effect that mimics the ability it comes from, and Blood Communion would infect adjacent units to the vampire and the target with blood parasite. Once again, don't know what blood parasite does, so I'm not sure how powerful that is, but I like the theme, being able to spread things out from your vampire using, the vampire curse that vampires are known for. 3 unique skills are Curse and Death, which is a ranged attack that gives soulbound to all enemies it hits, along with a passive that deals damage to all soulbound units at the start of each of the vampire's turns. Does that mean only the vampire gets that extra damage, or do all of their friendly units get that damage? That would be pretty different depending on how that actually works on your side, how the extra damage is actually accessed. Rosebound Noble allows the vampire to summon in a tier 4 Rose Knight in battle, a new unit introduced in this content. Additionally, as a passive, the signature skill allows you to recruit Rose Knights from your cities. That makes a lot of sense. So that sounds like if you farm the map, you can get access to tier 4 units very reliably through this skill, and therefore you won't have to get the tome associated with this unit to be able to make it. But I think if you have level 12 heroes, you're probably at a point where you're pretty close to being able to get tier 4 units from your tomes anyways, so that doesn't seem too overly powered, just like a neat little thematic thing that makes sense. If you're going to be a Rosebound Noble, you should be able to recruit the Rose Knights in your cities, as well as, get access to them in combat. Supernatural movement gives the vampire a free teleport in battle and fast movement speed itself, and all turn vampires under control under you as long as they aren't mounted. Okay, so they get fast movement so long as they aren't movement, and I guess the free teleport. That seems like this really encourages you not to use mounts with your vampire rulers, but maybe I'm missing something there. I'm sure there's a way to make it work with mounted units and the free teleport, but maybe I don't know. I could just be misunderstanding what he wrote here. I think that's pretty much everything. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed reading this dev diary. What are they going to cover next week? That's what I want to know here. I had a lot of fun designing this, and they went overboard. Yeah, maybe a little. It's okay. It's nice. It looks fun. Come back in a few weeks with new tomes. Okay, so they're not going to talk about tomes next week. Bass is going to be talking about the vampire's favorite hangout spot, the sunless terrain. Okay, that sounds good. All right, that's everything I have for you in this video. Hope you have a good rest of your day.